Hi everybody, I'm Joe Brophy at Cosmic Headquarters here in Lake Sunapee. September, post-Labor Day, everybody's gone home, sun's out, shining, cool breezes. So I'm preparing to teach a class at Dartmouth and Hanover at their Iliad, that's the Institute for Lifelong Learning for seniors, on the topic Global Trends, the Year 2030 Alternative Worlds. And it's based on a report produced by NIC, that's the National Intelligence Council, in conjunction with the CIA and the military, other international organizations. It's a quadrennial report. It's produced for the president, for his edification and for strategy and tactics and so forth. I found a video that I'd like to use in my class on fertility rates, but before showing it, I really need to apologize. I'm not happy with the tone of the narrator. I found a message. The technical message in the program is very accurate, it's actually really sound, but I was not happy with the tone. It was prejudicial in nature. It projects a feeling that Muslims are bad people. Muslims are not bad people. Carol and I discovered this firsthand on our 6-week trip to Africa. We sailed from Cape Town to Morocco, stopping at 22 ports and 16 countries. We found the Muslims to be very congenial, very intelligent, very sincere, and very reverential. We incidentally were on the National Geographic Explorer with about 20 naturalists and scientists, and we were there to study African culture. One of the things we discovered is that a lot of the baloney being slung around the internet on Islamic beliefs and the Quran are simply untrue. They are not correct. Thugs have hijacked Muhammad and the Quran for their own political purposes. The facts stated in the following video are correct. They're actually sound, particularly the story about fertility rates, which I can attest to as an actuary. But his presentation doesn't tell the whole story. There's a lot more to what's happening with demographics around the world during the next 20 years. And I'd just like to highlight a few points which I think are particularly important. The messenger delivers his message as a wake-up call. He says firmly, something must be done. Of course, I say, well, what must be done? Stop immigration? I think it's too late. Kill Muslims? Certainly not a cheery Judeo-Christian friendly thought. 3, require Christians and Jews to have more babies? It's not going to happen. Not even in Ireland or Poland. Perhaps maybe in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. The report, Global Trends 2030, Alternative Worlds, is a quadrennial report produced by the National Intelligence Council, NIC. The report emphasizes that jihadist-style terrorism will probably trail off before 2030. Good news, or perhaps not good news, because it'll be replaced by non-Islamic jihadist-style terrorism from organizations sometimes referred to as NGOs, non-governmental organizations, but essentially groups that want to do harm. These organizations can wreak havoc because of the availability of weapons of mass destruction that can be manufactured with three-dimensional 3D printing. These are high-tech, toxic, or percussion-type munitions that can create a lot of damage. And this point is emphasized many times in the Global Trends report. Getting back, here's some facts about fertility and migration and aging and movement of populations that will, from place to place, that will occur during the next 20 years. First of all, the good news, the population in the USA will continue to grow to about 500 million people by the year 2050 because of fertility and because of migration, much of which might be illegal migration. This is one of the reasons I've always been supportive of illegal migration, because of the long-term benefits to our society, assuring us of a growing workforce and a growing consumer base. One of the interesting facts about the USA is that we're very facile as a society in absorbing migratory cultures. We've been doing it for well over 150 years without a great deal of disruption. TG, exclamation point. Of course that means thank God in Gaelic. So the USA will have a growing workforce to fill jobs that have not yet been created and a growing consumer base. General Cartwright, former Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and a featured speaker on emerging technologies with regard to the report Global Trends 2030, said, and I quote, "We have the technology tools to teach our young growing workforce the skill needs needed to help the USA compete effectively in the emerging global economy." Here's another point. Point 2. The average age in Russia will increase from 39 to 44. And its populations will shrink from 140 million to 130 million. It's not good for Putin, not good for Russia. More importantly, the average lifespan of Russians, because of drinking and smoking, is about 15 years less than the world average. Shame, shame on Commissioner, Chairman Putin. Of course, we're all worried about China. Here's our third point. The average age in China is increasing very rapidly and much faster than the rate of change here in the USA, going from 37 to age 44. That's a median age. While here in the United States, our age is increasing from 37 to 39. Moreover, their workforce is shrinking by 20%, which will create workforce shortages, labor shortages, and higher labor costs. Not good for the Chinese. Here's point 4. Japan, our ally. The average age in Japan will increase to median age of 52, the highest in the world except for some monasteries and convents around the world. Japanese are simply not reproducing. Chinese culture is rigid and unforgiving and unable to assimilate different cultures. They can't do it. Can't accept immigration in any form. Dr. Michio Kaku from CCNY, one of the founders of string theory, preeminent physicist, in a talk recently said that the reason the Japanese government is placing so much emphasis on robots, particularly the asimov robot, is designed to meet the nursing needs of the aging Japanese population. So I have 2 more points. Point 5, there are a number of other major demographic shifts occurring around the world. Mass migration from the suburbs to the cities, requiring the building of the equivalent of 75 cities the size of London during the next 17 years. The building requirements will exceed, during that period, the total building requirements since the beginning of time. Major construction ahead to meet these changing migratory forces. Another major trend is the growth of the middle class, from 1.2 billion currently to as much as 2 or 3 billion during the next 17 years, depending on how favorable economic growth is during that period. Growth in the middle class will place great pressure on housing, water resources, food, and security, which probably government will find very difficult to accommodate. Governments are becoming too big to handle the demands of the growing middle class. A demanding middle class requires a much richer diet and protein and other services. And here's my final and 6th point, and it might surprise you. It's easier to become a Muslim than a Christian. And therefore, Muslims are growing at a faster rate than the Christian base. In fact, Muslims now are the largest religion throughout the world and have surpassed the number of Christians. A lot of reasons for this, and I've described it in a paper that appears on my blog, www.brophyblog.net. The fate of Islam remains to be seen. On the other hand, consider that Turkey today is the 17th largest economy. The economy is red hot, has a military, the largest military, save perhaps Britain. It is a Ataturk secular culture that's been flirting with sharia law now for a number of years and probably will move in that direction. So Turkey will move into the top 10 economies in the world in 17 years. And who knows the fate of Islam? But perhaps we'll have another Ottoman Empire in the offing. If Islamic fervor remains unshaken and steadfast, then perhaps the ultimate clash near the year 2030 will be Islamists versus secularists in the media. So that concludes my remarks. Thanks for listening. But please continue to watch the following presentation on fertility rates.
According to research, in order for a culture to maintain itself for more than 25 years, there must be a fertility rate of 2.11 children per family. With anything less, the culture will decline. Historically, no culture has ever reversed a 1.9 fertility rate. A rate of 1.3, impossible to reverse, because it would take 80 to 100 years to correct itself. And there is no economic model that can sustain a culture during that time. In other words, if two sets of parents each have one child, there are half as many children as parents. If those children have one child, then there are 1/4 as many grandchildren as grandparents. If only 1 million babies are born in 2006, it's hard to have 2 million adults enter the workforce in 2026. As the population shrinks, so does the culture. As of 2007, the fertility rate in France was 1.8, England 1.6, Greece 1.3, Germany 1.3, Italy 1.2, Spain 1.1. Across the entire European Union of 31 countries, the fertility is a mere 1.38. Historical research tells us these numbers are impossible to reverse. In a matter of years, Europe as we know it will cease to exist. Yet the population of Europe is not declining. Why? Immigration. Islamic immigration. Of all population growth in Europe since 1990, 90% has been Islamic immigration. France, 1.8 children per family. Muslims, 8.1. In southern France, traditionally one of the most populated church regions in the world, there are now more mosques than churches. 30% of children ages 20 and younger are Islamic. In the larger cities such as Nice, Marseille, and Paris, that number has grown to 45%. By 2027, 1 in 5 Frenchmen will be Muslim. In just 39 years, France will be an Islamic republic. In the last 30 years, the Muslim population of Great Britain rose from 82,000 to 2.5 million, a 30-fold increase. There are over 1,000 mosques, many of them former churches. In the Netherlands, 50% of all newborns are Muslim, and in only 15 years, half of the population of the Netherlands will be Muslim. In Russia, there are over 23 million Muslims. That's 1 out of 5 Russians. 40% of the entire Russian army will be Islamic in just a few short years. Currently in Belgium, 25% of the population and 50% of all newborns are Muslim. The government of Belgium has stated 1/3 of all European children will be born to Muslim families by 2025. just 17 years away. The German government, the first to talk about this publicly, recently released a statement saying, "The fall in the German population can no longer be stopped. Its downward spiral is no longer reversible. It will be a Muslim state by the year 2050. Muammar al-Gaddafi of Libya said, "There are signs that Allah will grant victory to Islam in Europe, without swords, without guns, without conquest. We don't need terrorists. We don't need homicide bombers. The 50+ million Muslims in Europe will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades." There are currently 52 million Muslims in Europe. The German government said that number is expected to double in the next 20 years to 104 million. Closer to home, the numbers tell a similar story. Right now, Canada's fertility rate is 1.6, nearly a full point below what is required to sustain a culture. And Islam is now the fastest growing religion. Between 2001 and 2006, Canada's population increased by 1.6 million, 1.2 of those immigration. In the United States, the current fertility rate of American citizens is 1.6. With the influx of the Latino nations, the rate increases to 2.11, the bare minimum required to sustain a culture. In 1970, there were 100,000 Muslims in America. Today, there are over 9 million. The world is changing. It's time to wake up. 3 years ago, a meeting of 24 Islamic organizations was held in Chicago. The transcripts of that meeting showed in detail their plans to evangelize America through journalism, politics, education, and more. They said, "We must prepare ourselves for the reality that in 30 years, there will be 50 million Muslims living in America." The world that we live in is not the world in which our children and grandchildren will live. The Catholic Church recently reported that Islam has just surpassed their membership numbers. Some studies show that at Islam's current rate of growth, in 5 to 7 years, it will be the dominant religion of the world. As believers, we call upon you to join the effort to share the gospel message with the changing world. This is a call to action.